Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today for a base product review video. I haven't done one of these in the longest time, so I feel very rusty, but I really wanted to test out this newish range for Covergirl. I was sent these in PR, so I didn't buy them, but they came at a great time because I'm moving house and I'm sort of running out of powder and I don't like the foundation that I left out. I packed all the rest away. So these were a bit of a savior for me and I've been using these for the past week. So what this video is going to be is a demonstration and a wear test, but my opinion is going to be based on using these products together and separately and with other products for the past week or so. So I have a good idea of what I think about them. Now this range is the Covergirl Outlast Extreme Wear range. So they have the 3-in-1 foundation, they have the Extreme Wear Concealer and the Extreme Wear Pressed Powder. So these are supposed to last 24 hours. I'm not testing that. And this is supposed to last 16 hours. I'm also not testing that. But I was excited to use these because I used to love the Outlast 3-in-1 Stay Fabulous foundation. I think in my time, it's like the blue cap one. I've got a backup of that unopened, but I think over the years, I've used like at least 5 of them and it was a really, really good foundation. So when I saw this one, I was like, look, I like extreme wear. I've got oily skin. It's summer at the moment, so I do tend to get quite oily and my bases break down quite easily. So it's a good time to put this to the test, but it's also a range that I have historically quite liked. So I wanted to try it and I asked on Instagram and other people were like, yes, try it. So that's what I'm doing. Now I do have 2 shades. The one I'm currently wearing and the one that I will demonstrate is a shade 842 medium beige. I also have 825 buff beige. Realistically, I think I'm a mix of the two, but this one's quite a nice sort of summery shade for me, and I think this is more of a winter shade. So like I said, this claims to be a 24-hour full coverage foundation. It's got SPF 18 and it's supposed to be a lightweight cake-free foundation that absorbs quickly to provide full coverage and hydrate your skin while protecting it from UVs. Now it doesn't explain the 3-in-1. Now from memory, when they started doing the 3-in-1, I think it might have been like foundation, SPF and primer. I'm not sure. I don't know what the 3-in-1 is supposed to be, but I know it's something that's been going on for a long time in the Covergirl range. So there we go. Now, even though it says it's available in 18 shades, I can only see 6 shades available online in Australia. I haven't been in store, so I can't confirm if the stand has more. But the darker shade is the one I'm currently wearing, medium beige. But if this is the darker shade available in Australia, it's pretty piss poor. And brands need to up their game because it's available in 18 shades. I can see 6 online, so there we go. Also for reference, the shade of concealer I'm using is buff beige and the shade of powder is classic ivory. So it's a bit of a mixed bag all over the joint. So let's cut to me applying this and then I'll continue the wear test throughout the day. All right, up close and personal, I've got no primer on. I might turn this down so you can really see the redness in my cheeks. I put skincare on about 4 hours ago and some sunscreen. So that is just what I've got on, no primer. You can see my skin does have red patches. My face is a little bit more red compared to my body. So I tend to go more of a warmer toned foundation shade just to match the rest of my body. Yeah, my hands are more yellow than my face. So I'm going to go for the darker shade and I think that matches fairly well. So what I look for in a foundation is something that will cover my redness. I find low coverage foundations just don't cut it, but I do like a higher coverage that I apply sheerly because I feel like that covers but doesn't feel too heavy on the skin. And I do have oily skin. It's a hot day, so I like foundations that can hold my oils and not break down and wear a fairly decent amount of time. So that's what I look for in a foundation. So I'm going to demonstrate medium beige, which I thought would be too dark for me, but tends to work fairly well. I could mix it with buff beige, which is more of a winter shade for me, but I sort of want to stick to just one shade. So we'll apply this one. I'm going to use a brush. This is just an Eco Tools airbrush complexion brush, as well as an Ella Cosmetics sponge. This is wet, so I've got it damp, so that's why it's big and fluffy. All right, so I've got one pump. We'll see how we go with that. Just dabbed it in, and I just sort of like to dab around my face to get the product evenly dispersed all around. You can see again, this is a little bit too yellow tone for me, but it does match the coloring of my body, which is what I like to go for. And this applies really evenly, quite thinly. So if it's not too thick, you don't need to like buff it in to spread it around. It spreads nice and easily and evenly. So all of a sudden, it has covered up a lot of that redness that I have in my face, and it looks really good. This does say full coverage, but if you apply a small amount, you get coverage, but not like full cakey coverage, which I don't like. I want my imperfections evened out, but I don't want to feel like I'm wearing a mask of makeup. So I really like this consistency. You can definitely build it up as well, but look how even that was to apply with a brush. Really nice, and that looks flawless. Like if you've got drier skin, I'd probably say don't powder this or apply it over a nice sort of rich moisturizer or primer, and some glow will come through. But if you do have oily skin, you will need to powder it. But I think that looks gorgeous. So that's the brush side, and I only dabbed into that. So I do still have like half a pump left, which I'm going to pick up on my sponge. It might not be enough. Probably not, because that's only covering my cheek, but you can see that this also applies really evenly and really beautifully with a sponge as well. So just going to use another half a pump, just a fraction of a pump, and I'm just going to again disperse that over my face so I can sort of apply it evenly. This does tend to dry down slightly darker than the color it is wet. Some people call that oxidizing. I don't. I call that drying down slightly darker, which sort of most paint type products do. The wet form is usually lighter than the dry form. This might oxidize slightly. I have seen people say that CoverGirl foundations tend to oxidize. I haven't noticed this one oxidizing too much. Maybe at the end of the day, it's a slightly bit warmer than at the start of the day as my oils start to break through, but really not noticeable enough that I look like I've got like an orange pumpkin face or anything. It's just maybe a smidge darker. And I feel like that also has to do with what powder you wear with it. I feel like if you wear this powder, it tends to look a little bit more heavy coverage than if you use like a translucent just setting powder. So I actually prefer this foundation with a translucent powder than the one that comes with it. All right, so I'm happy with both of those. That's the amount of coverage I would want on a daily basis. All my problems have sort of minimized. They're still there. There's still sort of skin showing through, but it's not as obviously red. I don't think I did my nose on this side, but let's do it. But you can build it up, and I'll show that a little bit, but I don't want to do it too much because I feel like it ends up looking a bit cake face. So I've got a tiny bit more on my sponge, and you can just see that if you wanted to build on itself, this is when it starts looking a little bit more yellow. You can really sort of build up the areas of concern. This does layer nicely on itself and builds up. It doesn't look patchy. It doesn't end up looking too sort of cakey. So it definitely does build to get more of a fuller coverage, but I prefer it thinner. I just think it's a little bit, looks a little bit nicer, especially this color on me can look a little bit yellow if I build it up too heavy, but you can build it up. All right, onto the concealer. And now how I tend to use this, because it's got a really nice fine little nozzle, I'll just put a little tiny dot here. I do get a bit of darkness in the inner corner, so like tiny minute dot. That's how much concealer I use. And I just get whatever I was using to apply it, and I just sort of use it to brighten that area a little bit. I feel like this concealer, just from using it over the past week, I don't like it as much as the foundation. It works, like it's just brightened that little bit there. Maybe also because this is a shade lighter than the foundation I'm using. I feel like it's a little bit too light. But I feel like this can crease. I did notice yesterday, I don't know if it was because I didn't set the under eye area as quickly as I would like, but I feel like it was settling. There was creasing under my eyes. Again, that could have been the powder I used with it. This concealer does spread pretty fast, so I feel like you want to use less and sort of just slowly build it up, because if you apply too much, you're going to be blending it like all over your face. So yeah, it's one that's quite thin. I don't think it's super full coverage, but it's fine. It's not a standout amazing concealer, but it's fine. Probably the thing that I like the least that I've tried out of this range is the powder. Now I feel like, look, it's supposed to last up to 16 hours, blah, 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 blah. But because this powder does have some coverage to it, so you can see it's got coverage, I actually would use this more as like a powder foundation rather than a setting foundation. This is just a Nabla big powder brush. I find that this doesn't set your makeup very well. So it doesn't really stop the creasing of the concealer. It doesn't do the greatest job at setting, but also it adds coverage that I don't actually want. If you want a lot of coverage and you want your powder to add further coverage, okay, you might like this, but I feel like this can look quite cakey pretty quickly. So yeah, because of the coverage of this, I just would prefer it on its own or over something a bit lighter. I didn't use the sponge to apply, but if you did, man, that would be, you'd be cake face. You'd be cake face with this combination. So in terms of the finish of all of them together, like it looks fine and it feels fine. It's, you know, I like it, but I do think these products benefit from not being mixed together, if that makes sense. I think the foundation, from my experience, works the best because it's a nice amount of coverage, it applies really nicely, it holds up fairly well during the day. The concealer is fine, it's not outstanding, but I think when you add the powder to the mix, it becomes a little bit cakey, and when I tried to set the concealer with this powder the other day, it did crease. So I don't think it's one of those ranges where you need to buy all of them to get the maximum benefit. I think I've actually had better foundation days when I haven't used this combo, when I've just used a normal setting powder and a different concealer. So yeah, you don't need to buy them all together. All right, I'm going to do a quick face of makeup and I'll come back to show you how things sit on top of this base. All right, I'm back with some quick makeup and everything is sitting very nicely. Now, sometimes when I do foundation wear tests, I don't use highlighter because if oil breaks through, I sort of want to show the shine on camera as being oils and not highlighter. But today I wanted to highlight, and I'm using one that's fairly finicky because I wanted to show that this foundation doesn't emphasize skin texture. So there's no Botox, there's nothing going on here. I just feel like this is a nice smooth foundation, and even a highlighter that is quite sparkly and can emphasize skin texture tends to look quite smooth. This looks a bit bumpy, but that's my red patch underneath. It makes everything look a little bit patchy, but everything's sitting really nicely. Yeah, no complaints. If you want to know what makeup I'm wearing, I'll have it in the description box, but let's start this wear test. All right, check-in time for foundation. This has been probably about 5.5 hours of wear. This review won't be as long as I would like it to be because I started later. It is what it is. It's hard with the toddler. But I wanted to check in natural light before I have to switch over to studio light. So I wanted to show it to you at 5.5 hours, and it's looking quite good. It's actually looking almost perfect. Like the flaws are my face, not the foundation. Everything's holding up really nicely. I will zoom in and show you a little bit more in a second, but I also do want to say that it was probably a couple of hours of wear in the heat and then a storm started. So it's much cooler now. It wasn't a full day of wear with a lot of heat, so there's not too much oils breaking through, but yeah, I think it's holding up really nicely, and it has been over the last week or so. On really hot days where I wear it for a long period of time, it starts to get a little bit dewy, but nothing that's like breaking down and wearing off. So it is a pretty long wearing foundation on my skin anyway, but I'll zoom in and show you some texture and stuff going on. So you can see around my nose, it hasn't broken down. There's the texture, hasn't broken down, maybe a little bit of wiping my nose, but everything is looking pretty together. And again, if there's any issues, it's either my application or my face. It's not the foundation breaking down. It's looking really nice. Again, I probably should have put more back here, but hasn't broken down on my chin. There's a little bit of dewiness happening, but nothing crazy. It's looking really good at the 5.5-ish hour mark. All right, I'm back with my final check-in and my conclusion of what I think about the Covergirl Outlast Extreme Wear range. Look, I've been wearing this for about 10 hours, which is really not as long as I think foundations should last. When I used to work at an office job, I'd do my makeup at about 7:30. I'd be home at about 6:30, and generally sometimes I'd go out after work. So I do think foundations at very minimum should wear 12 hours. And I'm confident that this one does. I have worn it for 12 hours. I've got rogue hairs going everywhere. Go away. So I have worn it for 12 hours in the past and longer, and it holds up very nicely with my oily skin. The studio lights do make this look a little bit shinier than it is in person, but there's no like breaking down of the foundation. There's some wearing off at the chin, which is no big deal. If I wanted to go out, I could just sort of blot and touch it up a little bit and just sort of patch that one back up. A little bit of wearing, a little bit of oil in the nose fold, but the rest of it is nice. This is quite matte. Yeah, it's not breaking down and going patchy. It's just wearing off sort of subtly in certain areas, and I'm totally fine with that after 10 hours of wear. One thing I didn't do today actually was wear any masks. I didn't go into any shops today, so I think that you would see a little bit more rubbing around the nose area and the chin area earlier if I wore masks today, but I didn't need to. I was at home or I was just out in the park. So yeah, there would have been a little bit more wearing, but that is masks for you. So I really like this foundation. I think it holds up really nicely on my skin. You can tell that it hasn't oxidized heaps. It seems like it still matches my neck. So even though I'm looking a little bit bronzed from my bronzer, this is not turned orange or much darker than when I applied it. So I don't think on me anyway, oxidization is a problem with this. But that also comes down to your skin chemistry. So if you've had issues in the past with Covergirl, you might have issues with this one. I've never had oxidization issues with Covergirl. So again, might just be skin chemistry, or it might be that they've solved that issue. So I like the finish of it. I like how it wears. I like the feel of it. It doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel greasy. It doesn't feel cakey. I think this foundation is really nice. What I don't love so much is these two products. Firstly, the concealer, and I will actually get closer in. I think you can see it's starting to like settle into my fine lines and sort of emphasize fine lines. Also, it tends to make my mascara migrate. Can you see? I'll get closer so you can see. But I've had this happen in the past where some concealers, if they don't set properly and they stay a little bit tacky, whatever you have on your lashes tend to sort of migrate and move on your concealer. And there's been a couple of days this week where I'm like, I'm looking kind of panda-eyes at the end of the day, and I think it's this. So not only does this sort of settle, but it also isn't the most flattering by the end of the day. So I'm not too sure if you can see that super well, but yeah, I do have some eye makeup sort of transferring down, and I'm not sure if you can see where it's sort of emphasizing my fine lines. I also wasn't a huge fan of this powder. I just don't think it sets well enough, and the emphasis is more on coverage than it is setting. And what I want from a powder is I want it to set my base that I have created, lock it in, and make it last. Whereas this changes it. It adds coverage, and it takes quite a lot of powder to set the base down. Now, I did double check. I was like, is this a powder foundation? Am I using it wrong? No, the instructions are to use it over a liquid foundation, and I just don't, it's just not my sort of preference in powder. But if you do have dry skin and you want extra coverage and you don't want a powder that locks in your foundation, you want one that just adds some coverage This one might be for you, but I'm going to exclusively use this instead as a powder foundation for minimal makeup days because yeah, I think it's too cakey mixed with this. So yeah, overall, even though these do work together and they create quite a long wear look, which is the whole point of this, I definitely think the star is the foundation. That's the thing that I would repurchase. But these, I would use them up, but I wouldn't want to replace them, if that makes sense. I just don't think they're super flattering on my skin. All right, so that's my wear test and review after using this range for about a week. I'm actually a bit bummed that it took me a while to get this up because this was 50% off at Priceline last week, but you can get Covergirl in Australia at Priceline, Chemist Warehouse, I think Big W. So there's always sales going on. And even though this is not a super expensive foundation, if you can get it 50% off, I do recommend it. All right, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.